Welcome to the Mental Health Raw and Open podcast with your host, Jody Betty.
Welcome to the Mental Health Raw and Open podcast. I'm your host, Jody, and today we will be speaking with Amy Doublet. Amy, thank you so much for coming on the show. I appreciate your time. How are you?
I'm well. Thank you so very much for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I love when I meet trauma-informed people and I can learn from them, and you have so much to share and so much knowledge, and I'm looking forward to your space tonight too. I got that in my calendar.
Oh, excellent. Yeah, for you tonight, right? For me, it's
Yeah. So how you been?
I've been good. I'm nursing a little bit of a sore knee. I'm getting an MRI, so that's kind of, trying to take my own advice and rest, because rest is super important for our bodies.
Absolutely, absolutely. Tell me a little bit about yourself. I know you're like trauma informed to the max, so
Yeah, I would say how I look at trauma informed, I'm not really sure how it is out in the world, but trauma informed to me is somebody that's maybe taken a course or two. But I've been really, seeped in the trauma world for probably 20 years. I've studied with Dr. Peter Levine, his Somatic Experiencing Institute. He founded Somatic Experiencing, and he's really the pioneer in the trauma world in terms of bringing in the understanding of freeze and freeze physiology. Before him, that really wasn't part of the conversation. So somatic experiencing has been around about 50 years, and I've been assisting his curriculum for the past 12 and master classes and retreats. So definitely deep in there, along with NARM, which is neuroaffective relational model. Dr. Larry Heller was one of his senior instructors, and I've assisted in his program, as well as Steve Hoskinson's organic intelligence, and have been with him as well. He's a senior instructor for Peter, and they've both gone on to do their own body of work. And I'm also trained in healing shame. So a lot of trauma work, you could say.
it's crazy you work with Peter Levine. Like that's insane. That's so cool.
Yeah, he's so sweet. We just came back from retreat in Costa Rica. We did a 10-day retreat,
Oh,
and I co-facilitated in Costa Rica.
oh, beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. So to me, I don't know what I guess you would say entrenched in the trauma world is is probably accurate.
That's awesome though, because like it's, uh, you know, I don't know if you've experienced your own trauma, but usually, to get into the trauma of the world, we've been into some trauma to want to get interested in it. But the fact that you've, gone so far, I think that's amazing. You're just probably so full of knowledge.
Well, I was always in the healing world, not a clinical licensed mental health therapist, but I have a 30-year background in body work and physiology. And Peter's work is really based in a deep philosophical and physiological understanding of how the body operates under threat. So it just was the next logical step for me, because as a body worker, I noticed people having tension patterns that were really coming back week after week, and they weren't really getting any relief, maybe for a couple of days. And so I started asking the question, like, what is going on here emotionally that's creating these tension patterns, as a possible hypothesis for myself at the time. And Kismet, I found Peter and Peter's work through a polarity teacher who was teaching his work, because the Somatic Institute wasn't, it's called the Somatic Experiencing Institute. It wasn't up and running at the time,
Okay.
25 years ago. So I studied with her, and she really brought in Peter's work in an experiential way and less of an academic way. And then I really wanted to understand the psychology behind some of the things that were presenting physiologically, and then going further than Peter's work and bringing in more of the shame component really made a lot of sense to me, and how shame is often coupled with freeze responses. which is why, 20 years of talk therapy isn't always effective for most people, because of that missing link, right? It's like,
Yes.
I understand and I know all the things and I have deep compassion for myself, but my triggers aren't transforming, things aren't changing for me. We get stuck in these survival patterns. So to answer your question, I do have trauma. I think we all do. Maybe it's a capital T trauma, maybe it's a small t trauma. But Peter defines trauma as anything that's overwhelming to our system that keeps us adjusting as if we're continually feeling unsafe. So that car went too quickly, too close to me, and I startled and I held my breath. And now these things keep compiling on each other, and our physiology is operating like we're in threat. Different than abuse, different than emotional neglect. All these things are traumatic to a kiddo, of course. And things can happen over time that have our nervous system operating like it's under attack.
Yes, I lived in fight or flight from basically the day I was born until today. But I'm getting a lot better at calming my nervous system down and reminding myself, there is no present fear. I am safe. I still have always had weird autonomic trauma responses with my body that like nobody. I went to like, I don't know, 18 specialists and had, 50 tests run, and now they're all just like threw their hands up in the air like, oh, I've no idea. So I started doing my own research, and I was like, you know what, I'm like so convinced that this is just a trauma response. It's my body having, a response to the constant cortisol release from being in fight or flight all the time.
Correct. You get adrenal fatigue, and it's like, so we call that experience a syndromal. So Peter's word for the people that have such distress, and you said from birth. So when we have distress at such an early age or come in that way, we might not know the map for safety. Like there's maybe no regulation, right? Like if you're coming in with that. So by the time you get into your 30s, you had a Ferrari and it ran with the gas and the brake on at the same time pretty effectively. But by the time you get into your late 20s, 30s, you're starting to break down. Like that engine just can't handle that kind of rev and brake simultaneously. So that sympathetic charge is so high, and the parasympathetic is trying to go into shutdown and freeze at the same time. So it's like having the gas and the brakes on at the same time. And then you start developing autoimmune presenting illnesses. And I've worked with so many people with Crohn's and lupus and even epilepsy. Um, it's a very common experience with early distress, and that's all we've ever known. And even on a more mild case like myself, so you asked about my trauma, I never identified as somebody that had any trauma. I knew that I had a distressed family environment that was not, functional. Like I'm thinking these people aren't really connecting. They're kind of like robots, an unhappy childhood in that way, and not getting as much attention and love that I would have wanted as a little one,
Right.
but no physical abuse or straight out like harmful things happened to me. So I didn't think that I was quote unquote traumatized. And then later I found out that neglect, because I always thought neglect was people that purposely don't feed their kids or, chain them to the hallway or whatever the case. But actually neglect is really not having that face-to-face contact, eye contact, loving touches, playfulness, engagement. And that's what Stephen Porges calls like our social engagement is our ventral complex of our vagus nerve, helps us know how to find ourselves because we have the loving gaze of other as we're developing, right? And so for those of us that didn't have that, we grew up with really flat affect, and it learning disabilities per se, right? But it's really just that we're locked in this freeze state and this sort of disorganization in our nervous system. But the good news is that it's never too late. I mean, I was in my 30s when I found somatic experiencing, and my teacher said, wow, you're having all the presentations that I had before I got really ill. I was very sensitive to heat and cold, like my thyroid was completely off. I was hypothyroid. My adrenals were completely burnt out. And she really saved my life. And then going on to study with Peter was really helpful. Yeah, I think I was in my actually early 30s, and she was in her 70s. And I just considered it a really prolific, blessing to have.
Yes.
And so of course I wanted to dedicate my life as somebody that was in the healing practices. I think most of us find what works for us and study, people in the profession. It's like, oh, this really worked for me. I want to find out more about how it can help others. And, there's people that fall through the cracks all the time in any modality, which is why I'm continually seeking and growing and learning and assisting.
That's awesome. Am I correct? Dr. Peter Levine's book, if I remember, is something about waking the tiger within.
Yeah, it is called Waking
Okay.
the Tiger. Yeah, and
I remember having that, and it has a little handbook too, like a little side book for it.
oh yeah, it used to. Yes, that one has kind of disappeared, but
Okay.
if you have it, it's vintage.
Yes, it's vintage. I have vintage.
Yeah, yeah. And he has an unspoken voice, if you're more academically inclined, is more his dissertation.
Okay.
Waking the Tiger is a wonderful layman's understanding of what goes on with the nervous system. And speaking to your description of what has happened and manifested for you, there's a book called Scared Sick, or Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. And those two books overlap, and they really go into the physiology of distress, early distress, and
Okay.
how it creates autoimmune illnesses. Scared Sick is written by two psychologists, so they overlap a lot more psychodynamically. And then Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers was written by an MD. So his writings are a lot more physiologically inclined, medical, but they're both great books to read simultaneously. They complement each other.
Okay. Okay, awesome. I'll have a look at. I love the name of the one. That's awesome. My zebras don't get ulcers. It's like so random, and it automatically brings like a visualization to my head of the zebra, like with an ulcer, stomach pain.
Yeah, yeah, they don't get ulcers because
It's so awesome.
yeah, animals in the wild are able to complete the threat cycle, like because our brains, our neocortexes, our thinking minds, our rational minds are so new in the development of our brains, they really truncate our ability to complete and come out of the threat response. Meaning that, oh, if I don't pay this bill, I'm going to die, essentially, is what's
Yeah,
happening
yeah,
in the brainstem, right? No, actually, I can make payments. It's all going to be fine, right? But the rationale doesn't work because the brainstem doesn't understand that. Yeah.
yeah. That sounds about right. I was
Yeah.
very I have obviously CPTSD, and I was very up until about a year, 2 years ago, I started doing some inner child work. And I found it like so helpful to, be able to go back and almost reparent myself and give myself like the things that I didn't receive as a child, and allow, like I still find myself giving myself permission to feel okay, because when you're so used to not being okay, then you have a good day and you're like, oh, this is a good day, but then your brain automatically is like, oh god, something terrible is going to happen because you had a good day, something bad is going to happen, like ominous, right? And now I'm just like, wait
Exactly.
a second, it's okay, I can be okay, and it's okay to not be okay. I'm trying to find the balance between the two.
Exactly. And it's okay to not feel good too fast, too soon, to have the Goldilocks approach. And that's what we talk about in the somatic world is, just enough. Like I joke with my clients, God forbid you feel too good too fast. Right?
It's
'Cause
true, because it's like it feels so weird. It feels like you just like landed in China and don't speak the language, and you're just like, what is going on?
yeah, and in that way you don't want to create another defensive accommodation, right? Like so we start to feel really good and then freak out because wait, this is too good, something really bad is going to happen now. So that's why a lot of times the work is slow and over time, so that you can acclimate to this new normal, right? Doing too much too fast is really just going to create another defensive mechanism
Yes.
to protect you being anybody doing this work, right?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I find I'm always like, okay, well, like I read this, so now let's go get it into action, get it into place, let's go. And now I'm learning just, you know what? Healing is a long-term process. It's a journey, and I need to, for me, I spent so much time in the past and worrying about the present or the future that there wasn't much time in the present. And now I'm trying to spend my days focusing on today. And when my mind, oh, what a cute kitty. When my mind like bounces off into the past, I do something that will ground me, like go outside with the dogs or whatever else, just for 5 minutes to just bring myself back into this moment, because it keeps me in a state of hypervigilance when I'm just bouncing between, this anxiety, which is just, your brain reaching into the past to predict the future.
Yes.
And then, being in the past going, no, woe is me, how did this happen? And like, carrying all that shame. And shame is, I just did a podcast with your other friend, Amy. And, where I was saying shame is one of those things that I think so many people carry, but I find it so hard to put words to what shame is, except for that inner core feeling of just not being good enough.
Exactly. Yes. Shame has many manifestations, and one of them is attacking ourselves. And it gives us the feeling of being inherently flawed and not good enough, right? And I'm bad. So we take on the I'm bad, I'm unlovable, which protects us. It protects the attachment bond at such a young, early age, even pre-verbal, right? If I'm bad, it makes coherent sense as to why I'm not being taken care of properly,
Yes.
as to why I'm not being bonded with, as to why I'm being rejected, or whatever the case, right? It's a coherent narrative. I am bad. This makes sense. Because if the caregiver were bad, then we would really be in much more of a state of alert and distress, and possibly even, believe it or not, babies make the decision to survive or not physiologically. I really strongly believe that that's what SIDS is in many cases. It's this vagal control of the heart with when we're in distress and how it shuts us down.
I
And
had trigger warning, but I had my first suicide attempt when I was 8. And when I, say that to people, most people are like, "What? That can't be possible." You can't have thought at 8 that, things were so bad. And, not that I fully understood the long-term consequences of death. All I knew is that, someone said, "Don't take these pills because they could make you very sick or die." And to me, by 8, I had been through so much that I was just like, not sure what death is, but it's got to be better than what is now.
wow, yeah,
So,
yeah,
subsequently had 2 major suicide attempts at older ages. And then, I kind of just realized, well, if it's not working, it's not my time. Right. There's got to be a reason I'm still here. So let's figure out that reason. So I kind of put it as almost like a safety net in the back of my head. Like if worse came to worse and I couldn't, then I can always have this control. And I think with
Yeah.
suicide, a lot of it is about not having control. You don't feel like you have control anywhere else in your life. So then
Exactly.
all of a sudden there is something that you can have the ultimate control over.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm just taking that in. That's a lot to be 8 years old, you know.
Yeah.
It's a lot. And so no wonder Sanjay showed up. He's he's a master healer kitty. And
Oh, he's so pretty. Oh my goodness.
yeah. And I feel you. I remember at such a young age, you know, just the incongruency of these people that are supposed to be caring and paying attention. And I'm like, they were really just zombies, academic zombies. No common sense,
Yeah.
a lot of exquisite intelligence, but none of it common sense or have anything to do with connection or love. So
Right.
yeah, it's devastating for little ones, much more than I think we as adults realize, because we're now highly functional. We have all kinds of coping mechanisms in place. We even have defensive accommodations that don't even allow us to remember certain things,
Yes,
which
yes.
is really astonishing, right? Um, yeah, so I think this is a trigger alert. The most devastating thing that happened to me, ironically, has to do with cats, and I was in bed and my cat was about to give birth, and my mom kept hiding her, and I kept getting out of bed and getting her. I think I was around that age, like 7 or so, maybe 8. And I woke up in the morning with all these little voices in my bed, and my mom had proceeded to take them and drown them. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and I think because, she felt overwhelmed, she, had 2 kids and 2 cats, and she probably
Now 9 kittens.
found 9 kittens. And so she did the best she could, not to defend her, but that was so traumatic to me that I didn't remember that happened until my sister and I were taking a walk in the park. And this was maybe 10 years ago. And my sister's like, remember when mom drowned all those kittens? Like, she just said it
You're
like
like,
it was
what?
no big deal. She just blurted it out. And I started crying inconsolably, like an adult woman, just like in full on, you know, from 0 to 60 grief bawling,
Yeah.
because I remembered lifting the all the somatic memories came back, lifting the cover, seeing all the kittens, hearing the kittens, bashing on the door, trying to get into the bathroom. Yeah, it's intense. And so there's layers to healing, right? Um and that was probably the worst thing that's ever happened to me.
That is horrifying. Like honestly, like I'm such an animal lover, so much, like I love people too, but I really love animals and I have such a soft spot for them. So I'm just like, oh my God, like my father would like catch a skunk in the backyard and then do the same thing. And I'm just like, just put it in a cage and like take it somewhere else and like let it go. I couldn't understand why this, like had to happen in the way that it happened. And it was horrifying for me. And it's like one of those things now, even if I see roadkill, it's literally sends this shiver up my spine that I turn away like this really quickly if I see it coming because I'm just like, and I can't control it. It feels like nails on the chalkboard and it just goes up my spine. I'm just like, oh, it's
Yeah. Well,
crazy.
I think another definition for trauma is lack of choice, right? So it speaks to the level of my mom's trauma, not feeling like there was any other option, like calling SPCA or,
Yeah.
an animal shelter back then would have happily taken them. Um, so yeah, there's just lack of choice. They're only seeing one answer, the world's black and white. And
Yes.
yeah. And so that's really a strong marker of change, of healing, when the world isn't, all doom and gloom and black and white, and we can bounce back. Like, I can talk about this now. There's like a little, tear in the corner of my eye, but I'm not blown out anymore,
Yes.
right?
Yes. The
It
softening of the trigger.
Yeah, it's deeply touching, and I have so much loving, unconditional regard for that 7-year-old, 8-year-old, and like you said, giving her what she didn't get, the even just the understanding, right? And that's also what causes shame. It's not always the act of being um, if you're walking towards the corner of the street to cross the street and you get screamed at by mom or dad, are you shaming your child? It's kind of a trick question, because it's no, unless there's no repair. So if a child is constantly being screamed at and they don't understand why or what's going on, then that causes a deep sense of shame to set in. Um, but if mom gets to the corner and says, honey, you really need to wait for me. You scared me. Like, it's very dangerous to cross the street without me. Then that child's like, oh, that's why mom screamed. Oh, okay, I'm not bad. I didn't do anything bad. It's
Right.
so it's that repair. And for those of us that didn't get that repair, that's the birth of pervasive shame, like you talked about earlier, right? And making ourselves bad and attacking ourselves is only one of the many ways that shame, a lot of people attack others when they feel shame. And it's not necessarily a gender thing, but a lot of men are prone to first attack, when
Yes.
they
Yes. The best defense is a good offense.
yeah. And generally, you can say, oh, what is under that? Like, a lot of people aren't even aware of what's under that trigger response to anger. And if they were really to slow it down and find out what is under that anger, it's usually shame. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, there's so much. We could have a whole, 3-hour conversation about shame.
Oh, I know, right? It's just so complex. It's so taboo still, which is like,
Yeah.
you know, with everyone opening up about mental health and being a little more comfortable to talk and stuff, but it's still nobody really likes to talk about shame.
It's
And
still crickets.
it is, and it's so essential in healing. Like it's so essential to sit with it and to address it and to, I, I kind of like allow it to process without holding on to it.
Yes. Well, it's just so icky. It feels so unbearably horrible that people don't want to go near it. And oftentimes therapeutically, if it's introduced in sessions by the therapist or practitioner, um, without enough rapport and processing, um, sorry, my cat stepped on the radio, so I need to
No
move.
worries.
Your sound will be messed up. But yeah, if it's brought in too quickly, therapeutically, a lot of times, people just don't come back because they
Right.
were meant to feel ashamed, because naming shame brings up shame, and they felt so horrible that they attack the practitioner, that they were so horrible so that they don't have to feel the shame, right? You get what I'm saying? So a lot of therapists
Yes.
don't even bother to work with it, either because they don't know how, or they got bit too many times, right?
Right.
And I noticed that on social media, on Twitter, when I post about shame, rarely does it get any traction whatsoever. Although there's some people, other practitioners we're all pinging off of each other and talking about it. But it really doesn't get that much traction, when I try to educate or talk about it. And it's only after maybe a year of working with people that that it's acceptable to start kind of naming and going in that direction where people have the tolerance to sit with it.
It's funny because I went through 5 years of pretty intense trauma therapy, and then I did CBT, and then I did DBT, and then I was still stuck. And I felt like, okay, well, this is, my healing point. This is as far as I can go. And then, so I kind of gave up on, well, I couldn't afford the therapy world, but I kind of gave up on it because like the last therapist I had gave me trauma. And it was so horrible that I thought I could never trust another therapist again in my life, right? So that's when I started going back into, okay, what do I need to deal with? And I thought inner child work was really important. So then I went and bought workbooks and I started working through it myself because it was just easier for me because I could do it at my own pace. I could, cry in my own space, that kind of thing. And I spent a lot of time writing letters to, emotions and to my inner child and to the people who had abused me and to the foster care system that let me down and all that kind of stuff. And it was so releasing when I was done. It was so, but nobody in all of those years of therapy mentioned to me about shame.
Nope, exactly. I'm so sorry. Yeah, I'm so sorry that you had to experience that. And
That's okay.
the foster,
Not okay,
it's
but
not
it is what
okay.
it is.
It's not okay. But my heart goes out to you because I can feel the kiddos that have gone through the foster care system. I work with quite a few of them. It's not easy, with enough stress, we do regress, and that ping of there's something special about people that have been through the foster care system. And now it makes a lot of sense as to how you were feeling at 8 years old. And
Yeah.
one of my mentors, Steve Terrell, you might want to look into him. He doesn't have a private practice anymore, but he his website, I believe, is austinattach.com. And he was pivotal for me in my work because he was himself through the foster care system and has a lot of dysregulation in the sense that he was only able to tolerate a session for a few seconds, like 20 seconds at a time, when he worked with my other mentor, and they co-teach now together. And so I'm telling a story that he often tells, and so there was like such a level of dysregulation that, you remember when I said, God forbid you feel too good too fast, like the regulation could only be there for 30 seconds, 20 seconds.
Right.
He would literally fly 2,000 miles, 3,000 miles from Austin to San Francisco for like a 30-second session.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, but now he's one of the most prolific teachers for the trauma and brain injury and early reflexes, and how when we don't have some of these reflexes come online, or they're truncated because of lack of attention or connection, especially for kids that were orphans in the foster system or in orphanages. His whole practice was that alone. And it's very, very special and tender and close to my heart. So thank you for sharing that.
Oh, of course. I would love if after we're done, if you could send me, because I have short-term memory problem, if you could send me his information. I'd love to, read about some of his work and stuff. I'm always, looking for new ways to help myself, which for me, I think I sat with this trauma for so long and I felt so ashamed and so worthless and useless. And then finally I was like, you know what? There has to be a gift in this. There has to be a reason I'm still alive. There has to be a purpose. And for me, I was able to just take from that the gift of empathy. So empathy came with my trauma as my gift, and now it gives me the ability. I wrote an article in 2016. I had just gotten off a suicide crisis line and I was furious. I was just like up to here with the scripted nonsense. And I sat with them and I wrote this blog, and for some reason it went viral. It has, 3 million hits. It's all over the world. It's in different languages now. And it just resonates with so many people because I think, I am just being completely raw and open and blunt.
Yeah.
And that's my gift. My gift now is to be able to connect with these people who still message me from this letter in 2016 and just, trauma dump on me. And I'm able to take their trauma and sit with it without holding their emotions either, because I was doing that for a long time, just dumping more trauma on myself. And
Yeah.
now I can give back with empathy. And that to me has been, the greatest gift that has come out of my trauma.
It's beautiful. Thank God you're here and you're alive. You're very much alive and helping other people feel their aliveness. And I think that is the gift of trauma, to feel our aliveness,
Yes. And it's been so helpful too to help other people. It always, like on my worst days, I always like go on Twitter and I'll post like a bunch of positive quotes because I know, if I'm feeling crappy, someone else is feeling crappy too. And maybe they need to see this quote right now.
Yeah, well, what's really impressive is you being able to do a lot of work on your own, because that's like very, very difficult, when we're in the thing and there's so much that we don't know, and a lot of it is physiologically driven. So that says a lot about you, your tenacity and perseverance and persistence. And
Thank you. Yeah, I'm pretty resilient at this point.
yeah, the world needs your light and your wisdom and your modeling, like that it can be done even with not having the finances. So Kathy Kane and Steve Terrell wrote a book together, my mentors, called Nurturing Resilience. So that's the work for people such as yourself, that have come through like with the extraordinary circumstances of neglect or abuse, and really, like, it's the kiddos in the foster system, and that earliest of disruption, right? And some of us have had it in loving families like myself. I would say that I probably fit in that category of, foster kids, because it's equivalent to not having any connection or love,
Yes. Yeah.
no bonding. So Steve and Kathy really, really helped me. Their work is profound. The book's called Nurturing Resilience, and it's been skewed a little bit more towards practitioners, but I think you might get a lot out of it.
Okay.
And yes, I love the parts work is so very tender and bringing in what we needed at the time and didn't get is especially important. And I really like to do it from the child's perspective, the part you're working with, from their perspective, because I've worked with so many clinical therapists that are like, oh yeah, I do this all the time, this is my work, blah blah blah, like I don't really need to do this piece with you. I'm like, okay, well, just humor me. If in the first 20-30 seconds it doesn't go in a way that or it goes in the way that scripted, we'll drop it. And we always end up going through and having a profound experience, because most people are not coming from that kiddo's perspective. They're coming from the integrated adult's perspective, knowing what they didn't get when they were little, what they should have gotten, and now they're going to go back with an agenda and do the thing. No, just say hi to that little kiddo.
Yes.
Like, what would you do if you saw a kid sitting in the corner sulking by himself or herself? Like, what would you do? Or their selves, what would you do? You would go over and you would say, hey, what's up? Can I sit with you? Just say hi.
Yes.
Like, who does that?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like we all have agendas and we all have to heal and fix it and make it right and do it on a fast timeline. So
Yeah, absolutely. And it's holding space for, others is another gift that, and I can tell I have really good gut feeling. I've learned to kind of, that the mind complicates everything. The heart is definitely not the smartest. But your gut reaction 9 times out of 10 is right. And I can feel I can feel your energy, and I can feel your, like, very true. Like you're very genuine. You're a very genuine person. So your therapy must be, accommodated towards that, which is, I think, is wonderful because I'm sure you not only intellectually do you have a lot to give, but I can feel your like emotionally supportive aura, if that makes sense.
Oh, thank you. It took me a minute to figure out you were actually talking about me. So that speaks. So thank you. I accept that.
You're
And
so welcome.
yeah.
You're so
Um,
welcome.
yeah, a lot of the intellect goes out the door, and I think I work a lot more from the right brain in the feeling sense, the felt sense when I'm actually working. Having said that, I do work with a lot of analytics scientists, mathematicians, people in the tech world as well. And there isn't really a buy-in unless I understand the whys. So I get very intellectual when I need to be, usually in the very
Right.
beginning, and always invite them to ask me to explain some wacky thing we're doing, because there's usually a scientific answer and I can thoroughly explain it. Yeah, most times, like the first couple, 2, 3 sessions, there's a lot of psychoeducation and more academic talk. But then when they get like, oh, this is a language, this is a feeling, oh, let me actually take this in from you, exactly that loving unconditional regard, that thing that I don't know how to express, that I don't even know I never got or didn't get enough
Yes, yes.
of. Because a lot of people are what I call normal neurotics, and they didn't have a lot of quote unquote trauma, um, um, not in the way that I thought I didn't have, but really came from relatively stable homes. There is something called secure attachment. It does exist, believe it or not. Um, but we all have something. And for those people, just to get a little more support, a little more, like those are the kind of people that might have a fender bender and still go to work and have no problems, but then they might find themselves a little jumpy for
Mhm.
no reason. They have one session and they're good. They're off and on their way again. But for some people, that have long-term dysregulation, a fender bender could mean a week in bed.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. It's kind of like it just piles on and on and on and on until the pile gets so big that you have no choice but to just like lie in bed because it's just like you don't have the mental or emotional or physical energy to do anything else.
Yes, yes, yes. And so the key, you kind of spoke to it earlier on in our conversation, is to really, orient towards pleasure. Like the brain gets locked in that loop of threat and it can't come out, and it's this what's wrong train, and everything we notice is what's wrong. And that's not a bad thing. It's actually really good, wired into us for survival. Like we do need to pay attention and be aware of threat. But when we're in a threat cycle, everything becomes a threat. And so things pile on, exactly right. And like, what's the use, And so the way to get off, not necessarily off, but switch tracks to what's right, it's laying down new neural networks to how we deal with stress by noticing the goodness that is there. Like, wow, I'm having a really nice conversation. I'm noticing my breath is deeper, or my shoulders relaxed, or like to really go in and notice the body when there is goodness, because it tracks to the brainstem that, there is no threat right now. And we talked a lot about being present, being here right now, because when we catastrophize into the future, or we're stuck in the what's wrong from what happened in the past, that is the definition of physiology in a traumatic response, right? In an overwhelmed response.
Mm-hmm.
The more we can be here right now, the less of those programs for threat that are actually running. And to do that is through, the soma, the body, to be able to say, oh, my shoulders are relaxing. I am taking a deeper breath. Wow, I really like X, or through any of our senses, right? Visual, we're with our eyes all the time. So I usually ask people to just look around their environment and find, something that resonates to them in a good way, because we're all so
Right, right.
different. The therapists that are asking to name 5 things in the room, if you've heard of that one, are,
Yes.
yeah, is completely not, I mean, I have some choice words about that, because usually it's people that don't understand the principles.
You're like chips and my t-shirts and shorts.
Like what? No, that's for when you are freaking out so badly that I have
Yes.
to go, Jody, look at me. Tell me what you
Yes.
see.
Yes.
Like, I mean, nobody's in anyone's office doing any of that. I'm pretty much guarantee you, maybe 1 in 10 years I've had that happen, right? Where I did have to go, look at me,
Yeah.
and be really directive. That is usually not happening. So for those people that are saying, tell me 5 things that you see, that is so not the thing. Because you probably don't care about those chips or that
Yeah,
lamp,
I know, right?
right?
They don't hold
Well,
any importance to me except for when I get the munchies at night. That's it.
right, no importance whatsoever. So what we're talking about is changing the brain to orient towards pleasure, to shift into neural pathways that are going to change how we respond to stress. And so addictive, healthy pleasure is like my favorite color. Oh, that purple I see over there. It's going to be different for everyone. So me as a practitioner, I'm not going to direct somebody to look at something that I think is pleasurable. I want to know what they think is pleasurable, right? And so a lot of times, look, it's an 80-20 rule. So for anybody looking for healers, helpers, therapists out there, 80% of us probably don't have a clue. And, we're just trying to pay our rent. And there's the 80-20 within the 20%ers too, right? And so, I mean, I've been assisting for almost 15 years in various modalities, martial arts, 20 years. And there aren't very many advanced students, right? People just want to be told what to do and how to do it. And so you see in the marketplace, people with, millions of followers or 200,000 followers, and they're doing these interesting exercises on Instagram or whatever. Yeah, great. Those are the sizes, but what's the context?
Yes, yes.
And and like, oh yeah, okay, so you've heard Peter Vu, but why? What's going on? Like, what preceded that, and how do you work with that after? Peter always says it's not what I do, it's how I do it.
Right.
Right. So people are mimicking all over the place, and the marketplace is really confusing. So I just encourage people to look at people's histories, their studies, and follow your gut as well.
Yes. So important.
Yeah,
So
so important.
important. Yeah, you're like so full of knowledge. It's awesome. I love it. I just especially like having like all these different modalities to work from. It gives you, the ability basically to be able to work with anyone, as you said, from like a foster care child to, like Dr. Peter Levine. Like it's fascinating to me. So it's just amazing. And I just want to say like I'm so stoked to have met you, and I'm like so proud of the work you do. I think it's amazing.
Oh, thank you. Well, it's reflected in the work that you've done. So no wonder we've connected. So
Yes, I'm so glad to. I'm not sure if you have a client coming up. I'm assuming you probably do. You said you had a busy day. I don't want to keep you too long.
I have a few more minutes if there's
Okay, good.
anything you want to tie up, or
Yeah, like can you you mentioned I think it was the vagus nerve. That's polyvagal therapy?
it is polyvagal theory by Stephen Porges.
Theory.
Yep. Yep. So did you want me to go into
Yeah,
that a
can you
little
just
bit?
tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's called the wandering nerve. It's a 10th cranial nerve. It comes out of the back of the head and it wraps around the face, and it goes through the neck and into the chest, and it connects with all the major organs of our torso. So the lungs, the heart, and it goes into the gut. It goes through the diaphragm. So our breathing is affected, our respiratory system is affected in the sense of when we feel distressed, connected to the heart. So if we go into a shutdown, the heart rate, the blood pressure slows down. That's the vagus nerve going, okay, we need to preserve energy. We
Okay.
don't, and it's too overwhelming to run. It's too overwhelming to fight. We need to kind of go into this, dead possum place. And some people live there, and the really, really thin people that aren't anorexic, they don't necessarily look anorexic. They're just really wiry and thin. They could be, some of them could be in a state of conservation where they're not able to really come out of that, and they get stuck there. I'm not saying that all really thin, wiry
Yeah, of course, yeah.
the ectomorphs of the world, there are ectomorphs that are not in conservation, but I have worked with people that have been in conservation, and they're just so lethargic all the time, and shut down that by their vagal tone. And so to bring them up out of that would be what Stephen Porges identifies as the ventral system, because there's a dorsal system, which means the back of the nerve, and the front of the body, the ventral, is the digestive, and it gets us up into social engagement, that he calls social engagement. So we can have eye contact, we can feel that we're not alone. It's counterintuitive, like when we're feeling like isolating or a little bit depressed, we don't want to see anybody, but then as soon as we have a conversation with someone we care about or like, we feel better.
Yes.
Right. So eye contact, that's that polyvagal theory in action. You know, when we're having eye contact, we're having a pleasant conversation, we like somebody, there's mirror neurons, like, oh, they don't seem upset, there's nothing distressing, like the world maybe isn't so bad out there, right? Those mirror neurons are firing, and they bring us up out of this shutdown state. And so,
right, okay.
and then the other thing is, when we're shut down, our digestion turns off. So all the millions of people that are taking, you know, things for constipation or, you know, acidic stomachs, like the digestion is deeply affected by that vagal tone as well. And that shutdown response, or that freezy response. And so the antidote again for that is, you know, getting out, being around loved ones, friends, even self-touch contact, you know, being able to like cup your face or cross your arms and squeeze your shoulders,
right.
Hand on the chest, a hand on the belly, even rocking. So yeah, the polyvagal theory has been very helpful for a lot of people in the trauma world and understanding the physiology a lot more.
Okay, good. Because like it was bounced off me once, and I kind of like did a little reading, and then I was like, well, no one seems to be talking about this, so I don't know if it's like, you know, a good thing or a bad thing, or just not talked about very much. And now I see a lot more about it. So I was just, you know, curious more as to, because I know sometimes like I'll just be like doing nothing or doing some writing, and I'm like, why am I getting a headache? And then all of a sudden I'm like, why is my jaw clenched? Like, and then I did have to tell myself, oh, wait a second. Or like digestion problems. My doctor had me on like these medications that I was supposed to apparently only be on for, you know, under a year. She had me on them for 10 years.
Oh, wow.
And nobody could ever tell me what was wrong with my digestive system. I went for tests and scans and this, that, and the other thing. And
Yeah.
now, you know, having learned a lot more about how trauma really does affect your body, I've been able to, you know, get myself off those pills and take a digestive enzyme when I need it, instead of, you know, this medication that's probably done God knows what damage to my stomach in the first place.
Yeah, or magnesium that can help, but you know, we shouldn't need things like coffee and magnesium. Our bodies, you know, optimally running are going to do what they're supposed to do, but it doesn't hurt to have the magnesium to help with the bowel movements. But absolutely,
Oh,
if you're
see, I didn't know.
constipated,
Magnesium. Okay.
magnesium. Yeah, there's something Whole Foods sells, and maybe Sprouts, I don't know where you are in the world, but it's called Calm, and it's made of magnesium, and it's a powder. And that is, you know, magnesium is also a muscle relaxer.
Okay.
And most of us don't have enough magnesium, so it probably couldn't hurt.
Okay, perfect. I'll look that up, because I could definitely use a little more calm some days, that's for sure. And my muscles are the same thing. Like sometimes I'm just like, I feel like weary for no reason. Like I've had enough sleep and whatever else, but like my body gets fatigued easily. And I mean, I played soccer from the time I was 4 till 40, and I played up to like 5 times a week. So
Wow.
being in shape was never like an issue. I never had to go to the gym because I was always playing soccer, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, the symptoms you're speaking of do speak to adrenal fatigue, which wouldn't be unlikely, you know, if also if you have low blood pressure, grinding your teeth, headaches, if you stand up and get dizzy when you stand, if you are groggy when you wake up, but then you come alive and awake after 3 o'clock and you're more of a night owl. These are all symptoms of adrenal fatigue. The medical community doesn't really embrace adrenal fatigue, but they're starting to. It's, our bodies are complex. There's so much, right?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, that's so awesome. I will let you go because I know you don't want to keep you from your clients and let you get your, 10 minutes to breathe before you go into a session. But I just want to say thank you so much. I'm so grateful to have met you, and I appreciate your time, and I look forward to getting to know you better. And, I'm hoping that, when you have some free time, we can just maybe pick a topic and you can come back on and we can just shoot the shit about whatever topic that is. I'd love to do that.
Absolutely. You're so very welcome. I love connecting with you, Jody. And I love the fact that, none of this is, pre or orchestrated. It's just a conversation and it goes
Yeah,
like it is.
I'm not good with I remember going on podcasts and someone gave me a list of 10 questions. I'm like, how am I supposed to remember these? Are they going to be in order? What if she doesn't ask them in order? And I was like, no, my podcast is literally just a conversation with a recording. Anything that needs to be edited out can be edited out later.
Yeah, I love it. I love your energy. I love your spirit. I love how, again, how you persevered and you're here.
I appreciate that.
The energy of triumph is palpable, and I really appreciate you being in the world and spreading this information.
And I appreciate you, and I'm going to see you at your space tonight. I have it set on my phone now for every Wednesday at 6 o'clock. I'm so stoked.
Awesome. Yeah, on Twitter, in Spaces, we have
Yeah.
a somatic conversation with Amy Doublet, who you've had on here, and
Yes.
Mr. Bob Beer, who I think you'll have on, and
Yes.
beautiful people. I'm so glad I met them on Spaces. And
I know, and the three of you are just like a wealth of knowledge put together. It's just amazing. It's
yep,
amazing.
we're also different and we come together in a really good way. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's so nice to hear all the different perspectives, like different aspects and different perspectives. And it's like meeting people on different parts of their journey. It gives me hope that there is beyond this stage of healing. You know what I'm saying?
Oh yeah.
So I
Well,
appreciate
there
you for
is. You've
providing hope.
experienced it. You've experienced it.
I'm still healing. I'm still healing. I still have some things to work on. I have
Yeah.
two big
Well,
triggers, but
yeah, we always will. Like, here's the thing, we always will. But to celebrate where we've gotten to, and that there are certain things that can heal and we don't have to keep working on. There's that
yes,
too. And
yes,
yeah, there is that too. And so the sometimes people to like brush off that and, well, I still have my issue. Yeah, we all have issues. We're human beings. We're limited by our fallibility that everyone has, and there's certain things in our past that can absolutely be healed and no longer trigger us.
yes, absolutely. And I never thought that. Honestly, I thought I'd just be a triggered maniac for the rest of my life. And I'm so I'm happy with myself and I'm proud of myself, which is not something I say very often, for getting past where that stuck point where I thought, that was it. This is the end of healing, and now I just have to deal with this. And to be able to push through that has, given me confidence, and it's given me a little more security, and given me the gift of being able to, pass that information out to others, just like you do. So I'm just so thankful.
Well, thank you for sharing yourself with me, and I
Of
look forward to
course.
more.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I hope you have a wonderful day.
You too. All right, Miss Jody.
Okay, take care.
Thank you for listening to the Mental Health Raw and Open podcast with your host, Jody Betty. If you enjoyed today's show, please give it a like and don't forget to smash that subscribe button. And if you appreciate the work I do, why not buy me a coffee? Details in the show notes. Today's episode was recorded and edited by Dorian Kent and produced by Jody Betty and Dorian Kent. This has been a Raw and Open production.